The House of the Dragon is coming and we're excited. Sure, Season 8 of Game of Thrones left a bad taste in our mouths, but everything we've seen about the new prequel series from HBO looks totally wild. And if you need some convincing too, we're here for you. In this video, we'll be taking a look at a few reasons why you should be excited about the House of the Dragon. First off, it's George R.R. Martin approved. It's always a good sign when the guy who wrote the source material approves of the adaptation. That's exactly the case for the House of the Dragon. With GRRM having seen a few episodes of the show, although those weren't finished cuts, the author had tons of praise for it on his blog, and highly recommended that fans of his book check it out. A lot of the material for the House of the Dragon came from the world building that GRRM did in his books. One of the biggest sources for the show was Fire and Blood, a history of House Targaryen that GRRM wrote and published in 2018. And while GRRM says that the show has taken some liberties with his material, he's pleased overall with their take on the events. Now, some skeptics might say that GRRM approves of Game of Thrones too, but that wasn't always the case. While he loved the work that the show did to bring his books to life, once the show ran out of books to adapt, it started going off the rails. Where GRRM used to personally script at least one episode a season, he ended all of his commitments towards HBO's show towards the end. As far as anyone knows about his opinion, he hated how the show ended. So the fact that he's optimistic about the House of the Dragon is good news. And since it's an adaptation, we can already see what kind of show it's gonna be. At this point, we know more about the history of the Targaryen family than we do about the actual events of the main A Song of Ice and Fire books. And what we've seen from that history is a lot of material for shows as gripping and exciting as the most shocking moments from Game of Thrones. Don't worry, we won't spoil anything, but we will reassure you that this show is being built in a strong foundation. We've got strong and compelling characters, tricky political intrigue with a variety of factions, and lots of 9th episode twists. If you thought the Red Wedding of Oberyn Martell getting his teeth punched out were bad, you ain't seen nothing yet. There's also loads of screen-filling battles to build climaxes around. Game of Thrones was remarkable in that it brought Lord of the Rings scale battles to the small screen, but most of those battles were very real. Sure, there were dragons in a couple of them, but they weren't a big part of the battles before Season 7. The House of the Dragon will distinguish itself by the fact that its battles will have many more dragons in it, as well as other magical elements. You'll be especially happy to know that Miguel Sapochnik, the director behind Game of Thrones' best battle episodes, is heavily involved in the House of the Dragon. Finally, the show is in really good hands. A big reason why Game of Thrones was able to achieve such mainstream success was that it wasn't just a fantasy show for dorks. It was created with the sort of love and care that really puts the prestige in prestige television. Though this was a show about zombies to the far north and dragons to the near east, its acting, cinematography, and music were just as polished and masterful as anything from The Wire or The Sopranos. We've already mentioned that Miguel Sapochnik will be returning to direct 3 of the 10 episodes in the first season. He's also joined by the legendary Raymond Djawadi, who will be composing the same kind of musical magic that he did for Game of Thrones. Most of the rest of the crew of the show are newcomers with strong credits. The cast is even more exciting. Obviously, we have the Doctor in the house with Matt Smith portraying Prince Daemon Targaryen. If you don't know who Smith is, he also starred in the Academy Award hopeful Morbius. He's joined at the top billing by Paddy Considine, Olivia Cook, and Emma D'Arcy, and further down the line are a host of strong acting talent. This cast is a little different from the cast of unknowns that kicked off Game of Thrones, but proven talent is always a plus. We hope that we've gotten you as excited for this show as we've been all along. There's no way that the House of the Dragon won't be the biggest event on TV in 2022, and it may just be the biggest TV show of the decade. It's annoying that we've gotten so much as a trailer of the show, and yet we're moving ever so closer to the first episode release date. The dragons will take flight on the 21st of August. Now, in other news, we got tantalizing updates on the Winds of Winter. Unfortunately, it isn't a release date. GRRM's next chapter in his A Song of Ice and Fire saga has always felt just out of reach, even as the book has crossed a decade's worth of incubation in GRRM's head. These days, the writer is reluctant to even talk about the book, but he did say some interesting things about it in a recent post on his Not a blog. While talking in a general sense about the differences between writing as an architect and as a gardener, he wrote that his Ice and Fire garden has taken him further and further away from the events portrayed on the show. We could apparently look forward to a markedly different ending from what we saw on the show, and a character's survival on the show isn't a guarantee they'll survive through the books as well. He also pointed out that he has so many more characters in his books, and they each have a part to play in the grand scheme of things. Well, we'd love to see what George has cooking for us. All he has to do is put this book out there already. Up next, George will be attending the House of the Dragon panel at the San Diego Comic-Con. While the launch of the series just over a month away, HBO is naturally stepping up their marketing machine. What better time to go nuts with marketing than at a Comic-Con, the mecca for nerd culture? What's interesting is that they'll be backed up by Mr. Four Letters himself, George R.R. Martin. He'll be joined on the panel by showrunner Ryan Condal, director Miguel Sapochnik, and actors Paddy Considine, Matt Smith, Olivia Cook, Emma D'Arcy, and others. This is big news because it really shows that George is throwing his weight behind the show. He used to go on tour to promote Game of Thrones in its early years, but he distanced himself from the show through its latter half. He said it was to focus on Winds of Winter, but we later found out through the grapevine that he wasn't happy with how the show was doing. By the way, George, that Winds of Winter excuse is less believable than you think it is. Let's close by looking at HBO's other Game of Thrones Thrones spin-offs. When Game of Thrones came to an end, HBO started development on a whole slate of spin-off shows. The House of the Dragon is clearly one that made it to reality. Many of the others have since been sacrificed to the White Walkers. Let's quickly run down the ones that we know are still alive. One that was recently announced is a sequel rather than a prequel. We know nothing about it, just like the star of that show knows nothing about anything. Yep, Kit Harington is supposedly returning for more Thrones, while also being part of the MCU. He's got a career of dreams. The one that's furthest along in development is The Sea Snake, another show that draws from fire and blood. Steve Toussaint is playing the protagonist of this show on House of the Dragon, and he'll presumably reprise the role in this show. The next spin-off we'll consider is 10,000 Ships, a show that'll be first on most alphabetically ordered lists. This show, following the Dornish Queen Nymeria, will be set 1,000 years before the events of Game of Thrones. Amanda Siegel has been named showrunner of this project, and George says that he's seen a few scripts for the first season. We're also looking forward to A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which adapts the collection of novellas that are set 90 years before the Game of Thrones. Helmed by Steve Conrad, the show follows the Hedge Knight Dunk and his squire Egg, Egg being the future King Aegon V Targaryen. That's all for our video today. Are you excited for the House of the Dragon as we are? Or are you skeptical about the show, seeing what happened with Game of Thrones? Both camps should make their landing in the comment section below, and we can have a trial by combat to determine whether the House of the Dragon will be any good. But whatever you do, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.